Hi, everybody. My name is Ben. Thanks, David. I do this for a living. It's going to load kind of slowly here. I post mostly other people's content on the internet. Sometimes we make our own, but that's not usually what we do. See, we post things like this. Oh. We have 60-some websites. We give tools to our users to actually remix content. For example, you can just hover over this and then click to recaption it or see what everybody else has made using the same set of photos. And we serve ads, which isn't loading right now, to make a living. And a lot of the stuff is like waking up on Christmas morning because it shows up in our system every day. I know that some of you probably have run real businesses where physical objects have to be transported through physical space. And you have something called a supply chain, right? You have like suppliers who give you stuff, you turn it into something else, you add quote unquote value, and then you send it out to where your stores are, or you maybe, send it by mail after somebody's ordered it over the internet. For me, we don't have a supply chain, we have a supply point. Every day we wake up, thousands of people, out of the goodness of their own hearts or a misguided desire to be famous on the internet, send us content that they think is funny. And it's our job to sort through tens of thousands of photos that come in every single week and to figure out what people might like, depending on the type of topic that they ascribe to. So, for example, I Can Has Cheeseburger. So cheeseburger.com is where everything is at. But if you go to icanhas.cheeseburger.com, there's cat photos, lolcats, walruses, dogs. And then there's Fail Blog, which you may have also heard of. I know that Gwen just said blah, 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 fail. That's where that comes from. We popularized that term right before all the banks started failing, which was a lot of fun. And so this company is a fun little accident of the internet. I didn't really intend to start this thing. I'm an entrepreneur in my heart, and I had a failed startup back in 2001, and I decided to be an entrepreneur again. And when this site came across my radar, I jumped at the opportunity to become my own boss, and then I quit my job, and I realized I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So from a site called I Can Has Cheeseburger that posted cat photos with captions, we've been able to grow this business to almost 100 employees, and we've raised $37 million in venture capital. It's one of those things that makes you scratch your head and go, I can't get my great startup funded. What the hell are you doing up there raising that much money? And it's because culture has a very, very important place in our society. I was talking to someone who was talking about the fall of Eastern Germany. And they'd said, one of the biggest factors in the fall of Eastern Germany were blue jeans. I'm like, okay. So long story short, she's telling me about the story of blue jeans and says, blue jeans were the most coveted item in East Germany. And I said, how do they know about blue jeans? And said they were all secretly watching American movies and listening to American music. And it tells you the power of culture, that one of America's greatest exports, one of the reasons why America is so well respected is not necessarily our military might. Somebody in Peshawar, Pakistan does not care that we have 12 aircraft carriers. What they do care is that we made some pretty damn good movies. Right? We made some amazing music, and that is exported around the world. And they could care less how many guns we have, but they respect the fact that we've made them laugh. And so the amazing thing about our job is that we're able to actually be a part of that process. That if you think about the innovation of expression and culture and the economic value, the internet will create more of it than that has ever come before it. We will be creating and exporting more culture throughout our websites and our remixing and the things that we cringe about and things that we say are, the downfall of humanity. All that stuff today that we criticize and yet we can't seem to look away from is what's going to make the dialogue of the world change. And that's what will influence what people and kids and generations of people will talk about. It's not a surprise to me that when you actually look at photos of kids in remote jungles of Africa and somebody's wearing a Disney t-shirt. Right? That is as much of a testament to the economic might and power of Disney as it is for our ability to actually create a story and tell something really interesting. And I know that when you look at these photos of Grumpy Cat saying "Frozen like my heart" may not necessarily be all that highbrow, but it turns out that there's a system that's been turned upside down. That it used to be that there were creators and that there were consumers, And those two really didn't mix. And so that when you had a show on television, you had crossed this line and then this boundary into this world where all of a sudden you made it. Well, thanks to the internet, there's no line anymore. People ask me this question all the time. When did you realize that you were successful? And I said, I have no fucking idea. And thanks to the internet, I can swear on YouTube. So, because no one's telling me that I can't, right? No one's telling me that I can't be a creator. No one's telling me that my telling of my story is worth less than somebody else's version of theirs. That there's no one standing in line saying, you know, you don't pass and you do. And while that system still exists and television is still powerful today, that they're all looking at the internet and going, there is a tidal wave of this crap coming and we don't really know what to do with it. And they call it crap. And they don't know how to make it. They don't know how to actually talk to the audience because the generational gap is pretty darn large. That people are more likely to bury their face and listen and talk to what their friends had for breakfast versus watch Seinfeld. That's a scary thought for a lot of people. And that kind of accidental creativity is what encourages all of us to believe that maybe we have something to offer that other people may want to listen to. That maybe if we were able to create a piece of content, somebody out there might like it. And that it's that trial and error process that creates the superstars of tomorrow. That if you look at the life cycle of a movie or a TV show, the amount of money that goes into validating that concept is rather large. A Hollywood movie, a $200 million Hollywood movie is not out of the norm today. I remember when I was in high school, I think Waterworld was released and it was like $100 million. And people were like, oh my God, we've broken the $100 million mark and how will this be sustainable? Hollywood has always figured out how to make money. But along the way, they've always ignored the technical innovations that came on. I just read a press release by Time Warner Cable which said, there is no consumer demand for gigabit internet. No consumer internet demand for gigabit internet. And I thought that was really funny. And there was a commenter, I think, who responded to one of the articles, and his comment was, I don't think there's any demand for Time Warner Cable, which I thought was pretty darn funny. And as much as we'd like to make fun of these corporations, I don't really blame them. They're in an industry where they're being turned upside down, and they have to protect the rights, the profits of their shareholders. And they are animals that are beholden to the system. And what I want to do is change that system, because I run a company that by some fluke exists because the system allowed this little exemption called safe harbor in the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And this exemption, which prohibits the liability of our users falling upon ourselves, was created to protect dial-up internet companies. But by some magic, it allowed YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, us, almost everybody who is of any interest on the internet today exists because of this, I think is a 4-sentence provision in like a law the size of the Bible. This accidental kind of progress about copyright and innovation tells me that we know so little about what's to come that we have to be very careful about excluding things. That if you look at how the DMCA prohibits people from unlocking phones, I know Derek was speaking yesterday, and how now the White House has said, once you actually own that phone, you should have the right to unlock it, is a huge stepping stone into allowing the accidents to happen. And if we allow these little happy accidents, guys like me can continue to waste your time. And we may not know how the wasting the time of tomorrow may come, but it turns out we would love to use more and more of our powers to continue to make each other laugh. And to me, that builds these connections across cultures, across worlds, across languages that are unestablishable through military or political might. That it connects people from one person to another, that it's not about governments, it's not about states, and it's not about power. It's about people like my friend Matt Harding, and I'll tell you this final story. He travels the world taking videos of himself dancing. And he was telling me this story. He just went to North Korea, Cuba. He just did his 3rd video. It was this really expensive campaign for him to travel the world and dance. And he had arrived at that job accidentally because he's a world traveler. And it turns out that he wanted to get a bunch of people he didn't speak any languages with in his video, and he started dancing, and he dances really badly. He's a software developer in Seattle. He doesn't know how to dance. And so he would go all over the world, and these people started dancing with him, and his videos became more and more popular. And if you watch the video, it almost brings a tear to your eyes. For some reason, he's able to connect with these people in an authentic and fundamental way that is incredibly powerful. And so he told me the story. He was invited to Saudi Arabia by one of the many princes of Saudi Arabia. And he was escorted directly from the airport to this tent in the middle of the desert to meet with a bunch of Bedouin tribes who live out there. And so he shows up, and there's a bunch of people wearing the traditional garb and wearing swords and guns, and he's kind of frightened. And apparently they were told that they should dance with this guy in this video, and now Matt all of a sudden had to perform and make these guys dance with him with these guns and these swords in the middle of the desert. And so he tries to dance, and he's like, man, these guys really can't dance. And here's a guy who doesn't know how to dance telling somebody that they can't dance. And he's having this, he knows that this is not working, and he knows that he's gonna really let down this fan who's paid for him to travel all the way to Saudi Arabia, the prince that had done this. And he's like, I really want to figure out how to do this. And he had an idea in the middle of the desert, and he goes, and he doesn't really speak the language, right? And he's like, do you guys know how to do this? Hello, my baby. Hello, my darling. Hello. And all of a sudden, the tribes look at each other like, yes. They knew, I forgot what that dance is called, but they knew how to do that because they watched American television in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia. So there he is, his last Hail Mary effort to connect with these people that he knew nothing about, coming through the power of expression and culture. I think we can have more of that. I think we underestimate that. And I think that if we stopped telling ourselves no, we'll get more of it. Thank you.
I thought you were going to talk a little bit more about SOPA and post-SOPA. Could you just help us out a little bit?
Sure. So Alexis is sitting here, and I'm sure he'll talk about it as well. But we work pretty hard. Come on up, since you're next anyway. We worked pretty hard during the SOPA-PIPA debates. I think I saw the congressional hearing, which was just a giant farce, where they had one person from Google, and they were basically one step shy of verbally abusing her. And we got really angry, and we ended up on a bunch of email lists where we started talking about what can we do about this? What can we, bunch of websites who have really nothing in common and no political power, no dollars of any kind, what can we do? And literally within 72 hours, I think there were hundreds of people just signing up to figure out a way to actually do something about this. And I think that's what you call grassroots. There were no dollars and people with writing checks involved. It was really all about all of us saying, this is a crime against the internet. Let's figure out a way to fix this thing. And we were able to affect change by continuing to get the grassroots to tell the people that they respected, like people at Wikipedia, at Google, and put pressure on larger companies to actually do something that wasn't necessarily in their self-interest. I think I remember Twitter, Dick Costolo coming out and saying this is a bad idea, things like that. But we were able to convince a lot of people to participate in a blackout and a protest, and we really melted the phone lines. And I hope that 10, 20 years from now, when we look back at that moment, we'll say that that's the moment where we woke up the internet to its political power. So.
And now what?
And now what? Well, so I'm working on an idea, and actually it runs a little bit like to Derek's, where I want to continue to mobilize people that we don't go to sleep and wake up when there's a fire in our house, that we continue to actually look forward and say, what can we do about this so that we can allow people to be activists without the stigma of being an activist, and people don't want to be quote unquote an activist. They don't want to be a rabble raiser, but there's a need to create systems and infrastructures to continue to support the internet versus continue to fight the fire that gets put in front of us. And so we're talking about creating like a United Way or a AAA like service where people sign up and you become a member of the internet, and then you all of a sudden can have a membership and a power and a little card that you carry that says, I'm a member of the internet. And that means that I actually have a say in how you legislate the thing that I use to see the world. And that means that I am willing to put money and my votes and my freedom of speech and my expression towards a common goal that we as a group vote on. And I think there's a time I think the time has come for that. I think the time is overdue. And I'd love to figure out a way to make that happen. And I call it the Member of the Internet initiative. And I want to make sure that we can counteract the $100 million that are being spent by copyright lobbies and other lobbies to prevent us from actually getting our fair share of the internet. Yeah.
Cool. So are you standing there because you have a question? I want to hear Andrew Roche's question.
So Ben and Andrew Roche of Personal Democracy Media. So Ben and Alexis, nice to see you guys. So Ben, I couldn't agree with you more about the idea of trying to mobilize the internet community to build something of value as opposed to just saying no, like we did with SOPA and PIPA. But this conference in general has been focused on the corrosive use of money as political currency to game the system around control of the internet by telcos and cable companies and other corporate entities. And so as a leader of our community of internet users or members, what can we do to try to get more of our members to actually understand that the reason they have shitty service is because their system is gamed? SOPA and PIPA was great because everybody got together and said this is great, but 95% of the people at our protests didn't actually read the bill.
Yeah. If you have an idea, jump in. But I think it's really simple here. We lack the infrastructure. We lack the idea as an internet that needs to be defended. I think there's a real fear that the younger generation of people who grew up with internet like air will take it even more so for granted. I think it is incumbent on us to leave a gift to the next generation and say, let's build an infrastructure that protects the internet for the people of the internet. I really think that it's premature to say that we've tried to educate and it hasn't worked. I don't think that's what you're saying, but I don't think we've even tried to educate the public. I think we've fallen way short of that.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, when Ben first pitched me on this idea, I just wanted to high five him. Like, this is so incredibly overdue. And the reality is, right, if we want something to be a massive movement, I think of it as like a tech adoption curve because I'm an entrepreneur. And so you've got the early adopters. Those are the activists who are willing to come out to events like this, who are going to be the first ones to call their senator and reps. They're going to be the ones taking action every day to fight for this, and they are invaluable. But if you want something to really become mainstream, you got to hit that big, medium part of the bell curve where you're not going to have people self-identifying as activists. It's just going to be people who believe that this is the way it should be and will lend their support when necessary.
Yeah, and when we talked about just a simple mindset, instead of calling your congressman and that being a big messy thing that has to happen, we said, think of your congressman like Comcast. Anytime you are complaining about something, have them in your phone book and just dial them up and say, I'm really unhappy about this. Do something, right? Just put your congressmen and your senators in your phone book. And so when you see something that outrages you, call them and say, you really need to do something because I'm a customer and I hate it. That kind of simple message alone could make a big difference.
But isn't it true that we're going to have a problem when the internet's going to die or be attacked by 1,000 little cuts, and they're going to break up the coalition that fought on SOPA and PIPA around things like CISPA, where people actually can't tell the difference between the nuances of a bill? So they'll both be calling congressmen, one saying they want CISPA and one saying they don't.
Yeah. So one of these things. I want to get over the cynicism of politics, and I need to believe that people that we elect to office in one way, shape, or form cares about their constituents. And my belief is that if we're able to tell them that their constituents care about this thing and they don't want something to happen, that they'll ultimately do the right thing over the long term. Maybe in the short term it won't. Maybe we won't get all the 1,000 cuts out of the way, but maybe we'll get 900. And I think that's how politics works.
Okay, so thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Okay.